Hi, everybody. This is my three-step disposition framework on all my calls, specifically how I kind of look at my process on dispositions for whenever I have a deal to setting the first introduction of the deal and actually closing the deal with a buyer. You can think of this basically as sales for dispositions 101. The way that I like to break down my overall sales process on dispositions is in three different steps. So those steps are number one, introduction. This is basically whenever you're going to be telling the buyer about who you are, what you do, and what you have to offer. So typically it goes like, "Hey, Mr. Brian, I saw that you bought a bunch of properties in the area. I actually have a property that I think might be a really good fit for you. It's about 2 miles away from that last flip that you did on 123 Main Street. Just wanted to run it by you, see if you're still buying in the area." So that's typically how like the first call works. And so what I'll do with that first call is it's basically the introduction. I tell them who I am, what I have to offer, and all the details about the deal. And that's whenever I send it over and I try to build some trust and build a little bit of rapport. So after I do that, I want to set up the next interaction as well. So something that's very important is to always set up your next interaction on every single call. So every single call that I talk to a buyer, I ask them, "Hey, Mr. Buyer, when is the best time for me to give you a call back that allows you to run your numbers and do all of your due diligence for the property?" And so that basically puts a time frame on them, right? So it puts a time frame on them, and it also helps everybody be on the same page about when you're going to talk next and come to the next conclusion about the deal. Two is going to be due diligence and concerns, right? So remember, this is how I break it down: introduction call, due diligence call, and closing call. I really, in a perfect world, I like my disposition process to be three calls. But so the due diligence call, this is basically whenever you give them that second call back, and that's after you set up the next interaction. So you'll basically call them back, see if they had any questions about the property, see if they were able to run all their numbers, see if they basically basically think that they're a good fit for the property. And so that typically goes like, "Hey, Mr. Brian, this is Christian. We spoke a few days ago about that property that I had on 123 Main Street. I sent over the details to you on Tuesday. Did you ever get a chance to take a look into the numbers?" That's typically how I start my call. And so it works pretty well. And so either from there, they can tell you, "Yes, I looked into it. These are my thoughts. No, I didn't look into it. Can you call me back on this day or this time?" That's usually one or two ways how it goes. And so on that call, yeah, it's mostly just about fulfilling their concerns, seeing if they have any more questions, seeing if they saw the pictures, ran the numbers, and also to see if they want to do a walkthrough for the property. That's usually how the second call goes. Next is the third call. So this is typically, in a perfect world, this is the closing call, right? So this closing call is whenever you're going to be actually talking over the numbers for the property. So in the closing call, I'll basically give them a call back. "Hey, Mr. John, this is Christian. You're able to make it out to the walkthrough. I gave you a few hours after, like you wanted to. What's the best number you can do for the property?" Something as simple as that. That's not always what I say, but sometimes I do say that if I have a lot of rapport built with them and I know exactly where they're going to be at. So that's typically how that goes. And so typically on this third call, you want to be discussing the numbers for the property. So that way you can make sure that you're doing everything properly. You had the introduction call, you had the due diligence call, and now you have the closing. So you set up yourself, let them know who you are, send them over all the information. They were able to do their due diligence and you were able to address their concerns. So now the only next step is going to be actually discussing the numbers and see what's going to work and what's not going to work. So a few other key points that I always like to emphasize and that I go through every call with is going to be the five on the left side. Right. So number one is urgency. Always creating urgency through every single call. You can create urgency through all three of the different stems through the different calls, right? So the introduction, you can say in your introduction call, "Hey, Mr. Brian, we move a lot of deals, so these deals typically don't last very long. When can you look into the details so we can try to get the ball moving?" That's what you could say on the introduction. Next, the due diligence. Hey, Mr. Brian, I sent you over all the details on that deal that we spoke about yesterday. Were you able to run your numbers and look into the information? Reason is because we're getting a lot of offers in on the property, and I just want to make sure you can put one in before this deal is potentially swept under your feet. That's what you could say on due diligence closing. And then next on closing, you can say, hey, we're looking to take an offer in the next 24 hours. As simple as that. So that's how you can create urgency on all three of the calls. And next is just going to be consistently moving the ball down the field, right? Like this is sales 101. So every single call you want there to have some, or you want there to be some sort of purpose, right? I'm purposely trying to move the ball down the field to the touchdown, right? So I'm going to start from my side. I'm going to purposely try to move the ball down the field to get a touchdown. So that means making sure that I am going through the script correctly. That means I am addressing their concerns. That means that every single time I call them, I want us to be moving forward. I don't want us to be going backward. I don't want to call the buyer on the supposed closing call and he's asking what company I am and what my name was and why I'm calling him again. That's the last thing that I want to do. I want to make sure we're moving down the field every single call. Same with due diligence. I don't on the closing call whenever I'm talking to the buyer about the numbers, I don't want the buyer to be asking me for the information on the property. I should have done that a while ago. So that's consistently moving the ball down the field. Next is having purpose for each call. So this kind of ties back to the second one, having purpose for each call. So having a reason why you're calling the buyer every single time. You're not calling the buyer just to have a conversation and to ask about how his day was and for him to ask you about how your day was. You're having a purpose for each call. You want him to buy something from you and you want to address his concerns. So have reasoning for each call. Don't just call the buyer and just talk about nonsense. Next is going to be adding every qualified buyer to your list. So this is what I do usually around the due diligence or concerns, or if the buyer, or at closing, or if the buyer tells me that they're not interested but they're looking for something else. What I'm going to do is for every interested buyer, I'm going to qualify him a little bit further and I'm going to add him to my VIP buyers list so I can bring him some more deals in the future that might work for him. Next is have reason for everything. So every single time that you do something, you want there to be reasoning behind it. Every single question that you ask, every single act that you perform, every single concern that you address, you always want to have reasoning behind everything. Hey, Mr. Brian, I'm going to send you over the details. Going to have reasoning behind it. So this is my three-stage disposition process. Hopefully you guys got a ton of value from it.